video and all other videos on this channel are for entertainment purposes only. The content of this video and all other videos on this channel are the opinions of the creator only and do not constitute legal, trading, investment, or financial advice of any kind. Investing carries a high level of risk and the majority of retail clients lose money. Do not invest any capital unless you understand the risks and you are prepared to lose it all.
Right, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel and welcome to the week. Welcome to Monday. I think today what I want to do is spend a little bit of time talking about how I think cycles are in control and everything else is narrative. I've got a couple of tabs to touch on, and as always, we're going to kind of look at a few charts ready for the week ahead. Mostly just point at Bitcoin, right? Because I think that's what everyone cares about at the moment. I want to explain exactly what I mean, give you a few examples of how I came to this conclusion. Of course, we'll cover the most recent Bitcoin example, and I want to show you another example with Coinbase. The reason I say this is because these are the conclusions I have reached over my experience in markets, right? I know of the most recent Bitcoin example we saw, we'll touch on that in a moment. Many of you are now converted to this idea as well. But I first started to notice this early on in my career. And that is because I attempted to do fundamental analysis, right? I actually used to spend a great deal of my time reading through company balance sheets, using valuation metrics, projecting forward revenue and earnings and profit margins and all this kind of thing. And I was actually reasonably good at it, I would say. And what I mean by that is I could often kind of say to myself, okay, this company should increase revenue, and then the next couple of balance sheet reports would come out and they would have indeed increased revenue. But one thing I was very, very hyper aware of very early on was, for some reason, a company beating revenue, having more profits, doing better in general, rarely correlated to an increase in share price. And I also noted the inverse is true, right? You could often see companies miss earnings by a great deal and somehow the share price would move higher. And I now have come to understand that that is because the cycles are in control and everything else is narrative, right? If a company, for example, has a cycle behind it, if we find a cycle low like this, okay, and the cycle has bottomed and then we get earnings, if the earnings are good, the cycle, because it has bottomed, will move higher. And we will say, well, that's why the price is moving up, okay? The narrative we will use to explain away the price action is, well, of course the price is moving higher. They just beat earnings by 25%. But also, if the company just so happened to have earnings here and miss, okay, because the cycle had bottomed, the price is going to go up anyway. And so what would investors do? They would take that earnings miss and they would spin it in a bullish narrative. They would spin it in a way that we can explain away the price action to the upside. And they would say things like, well, we know we missed revenue by 40%, but the market was expecting us to miss by 60%. Or, well, I know we missed revenue by 40%, but did you notice how each time we get a balance sheet report, slowly but surely the damage is getting less and less? I think this could be a revenue positive cash flow company within the next 12 months, and that's why we're moving higher, right? Investors are really good at just BSing their way out of a cycle low to explain away what's going on. And as I became more and more experienced, as I started to apply myself more and more and try to figure out how I could get an edge over the market, I eventually realized that it was totally irrelevant what the earnings report said. And what actually mattered was whether or not the cycles were bottoming. Because if they were, the price was going to move higher on a balance of probabilities most of the time, regardless of what that earnings report said. And if the cycles were down, they had not finished bottoming, then again, regardless of how good the earnings reports might have seemed, the market's going to continue to trade down until the cycles bottom anyway, broadly speaking. So this was something I noticed very early on in my career, and is also a big reason why I stopped looking at fundamentals, I stopped reading the news and all of this kind of thing, and just became a purely technical trader. Now, all these years later, a decade and a half later, okay, we've just seen a real life example of this with Bitcoin, and I want to explain that now. So on Friday, I was talking about how although it looked like we were trying to break out, we hadn't yet entered the timing window, and on a balance of probabilities, we would expect rejection and we would expect to move down. And I was simply saying that whilst we could respect this breakout if it morphs into a real one, on a balance of probabilities, it made much more sense to sit back, wait for a true confirmation signal, and understand where we are in the cycle, which had not yet bottomed. Now, I'll pause here and be completely honest with you. Even after all my experience, even after having this strategy and sticking to it religiously, I was still feeling somewhat twitchy here, because occasionally the stock, or Bitcoin in this example, can break out prematurely. And if it does, it makes our lives quite difficult to deal with, okay? But occasionally, markets do weird things. And I was kind of thinking to myself, oh, it does, I have to admit, it is trying to break out. And if it does, that's going to make my life a lot more complicated. So if you were feeling twitchy and FOMO-ish there, then I was too, okay? So this never really goes away, to be honest. But the difference between a professional and everyone else is a professional doesn't act on impulse or emotions, okay? It sticks to the strategy regardless of how they feel on the inside, regardless of how twitchy they may or may not feel, and regardless of how much FOMO they may think they have at the moment. That's just being honest, okay? I too was feeling a bit twitchy here, but I didn't do anything. I sat back, I let the market do what it was going to do, and I allowed the system to continue to give me an edge over the market. And then as if by magic, a simulation, whatever you want to call it, or sheer coincidence, pure dumb luck, we suddenly get this news come out, the Bybit hack, in which about $1.5 billion bucks worth of Ethereum was hacked from the Bybit exchange. And investors do what investors always do, which is use the news to try and explain away the price action, even though we knew the cycle was down. Even though I've been showing this exact same chart with this exact yellow squiggle with this arrow here for weeks and weeks and weeks, somehow the majority of the market still sees this Bybit news and the Ethereum hack and says, oh, that's why we're going down, right? That's how we'll explain the downside price action. But this is why I say all of it is BS, okay? Because we knew on a balance of probabilities we were going down anyway, and then this news just so happens to show up at the right time. I believe that the cycles are doing cycle things, and this Bybit thing is neither here nor there. I believe this just so happened to be a piece of news that, because of where we were in the cycle, investors latched onto. Now, I make the case, because the cycle was down and this news came out at this point in the cycle, investors tried to say that's the reason for the downside. I also make the case, if the cycle had already bottomed, and instead we were somewhere like this with a cycle low behind us, okay, looking early on in the cycle, and then the news came out, I suggest to you, it would have either been a nothing burger, or investors would have flipped that exact same narrative into a bullish biased one. We would have been all in here going, ha, Bitcoin is rallying in the face of Ethereum because Ethereum got hacked. Or the narrative would have been, Bitcoin doesn't care because it's a Bybit exchange, not your keys, not your coins, blah, blah, blah. And the price would have been going up, and we would have been using this exact same piece of news, but framed this time in a bullish light rather than a bearish light. It's also entirely possible, if we were here, okay, and then the news came out, that the market would have just totally ignored it. It would have been something that we just did not care about one iota. And in case you're thinking, I don't know, man, it seems pretty correlated to me. It seems like that hack is entirely responsible for the downside. Well, then how do you explain this? Because within 12 hours of the worst hack in history, by the way, all withdrawals have been processed, the entire thing is back to normal, and you can withdraw your money, no delays, everything's fine, okay? No one cares. So this it really was all over in 12 hours, okay? The whole thing is now apparently rectified. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't spent a great deal of time looking into this. I don't know whether or not that Bybit is really solvent, really in no trouble. I don't really know, I don't really care, right? Again, I care about the cycles because they're in control, everything else is narrative. But it seems to me that it wasn't the Bybit hack that caused the downside. It was the cycles that caused the downside. And already, this thing is fixed. And so therefore, if it's fixed, should we not expect the price to be breaking back out again? Realistically, if this really was entirely driven by the Bybit hack, and now the Bybit hack is fixed, then shouldn't we be moving back up to the upside? But the reality is we can't move back up to the upside because the cycle has not yet bottomed. The cycles are still down, and therefore investors still need to explain away the downside price action. In case you didn't like the idea that it was the ETH hack causing the downside price action in Bitcoin, there was other narratives out there that we could have latched onto, such as potentially over in China, a round 2 of this outbreak thing, okay, is allegedly brewing. Maybe we've got to go through the whole thing of the past 4 years again. Just maybe the stock market therefore is going to plunge 30% in 12 weeks and Bitcoin's going to crash 66% in 12 weeks, right? Maybe this is your narrative that you want to attach to it. But again, we've been seeing this kind of news over and over and over again. Nothing's come of it yet, okay? It can change quickly, but so far, no sign of any kind of resurgence. Also, similarly to what I said earlier on, if this news was to come out where we are in the cycle now, okay, which is still yet to bottom, then of course we can spin this news and say, well, that's why markets are dumping. But if the cycle's already bottomed, the low is already in, and then this news comes out, we either interpret it as a nothing burger, or in here we say, well, Bitcoin is rallying because it's an anti-government, anti-establishment thing, right? Bitcoin's rallying because it's finally becoming a risk-off asset. We'll just make up whatever nonsense we want to justify our bags going higher. Right? This is just how we are, right? We're terrible people. We're lazy. We don't want to learn. We just want to make up some BS narrative, allow them to spoon feed it to us, and then say, well, there you go. There's our explanation. Okay. But the reality is, again, cycles are in control and everything else is totally irrelevant. We can predict the news simply by putting a few arrows on the charts. We know every one of these arrows is going to be accompanied with some kind of narrative because investors can't help themselves. Now, if you ask me, I think this is the most likely explanation for the downside, okay? Assuming that cycles are not in control. If we make the assumption that Camel's wrong about his cycles and it was a news-driven event, I would say this was probably the thing that did it. We had US existing home sales miss massively and move into recessionary territory, okay? Now, the reason I say that is I just so happen to be looking at this data and the stock market charts all at the same time. And the moment this came out, I believe algorithms started to sell off the stock market and Bitcoin, right? That's what I noticed, because literally the second this came out, we started to see the markets move to the downside. Now, I don't think any damage has been done, to be honest, right? I think, first of all, if we look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin is still doing what it was expected to do. Hard for me to say that any damage has been done there. When we look at the stock market, realistically, when we zoom out, is it doing anything it wasn't doing a few days ago, a couple of weeks ago? I don't really think so, right? We're still in this range. We know where the cycles are. So has anything changed? Similarly to Bitcoin, I would argue no real damage has been done there. But I did notice the very second this data was released, that's when we got the intraday reversal. So I think if we're gonna blame it on something, this is the most likely outcome. But again, are we looking at this data and saying that's a black swan? Are we looking at this and saying, well, nobody could have seen that coming? Okay, this is entirely driven off of the news. Of course not, okay? The cycles are in control and we're just making stuff up as we go along to try and explain it away. Now, I want to show you this next example with Coinbase because I believe this is an even better example. So on Friday, okay, the SEC, after years of litigation and millions of dollars of taxpayers spent doing all kinds of irreparable harm, has finally agreed to dismiss the litigation against Coinbase. There's no way that can be bearish, right? If we're being honest, there's no one here that reads this and goes, that's bearish, short Coinbase, right? Let's dump any Coinbase shares we're holding. Nobody is thinking this way, okay? The SEC has been doing its best to stifle this thing, to unfairly attack it, and now all of a sudden the SEC is stepping back and going, do you know what? We overstepped our mark, probably because of Gensler. We've got a new government in. Okay, let's step back and let's let them do them, okay? How is that not possibly bullish? Of course this is bullish. And what happens? Coinbase stock trades down to a new low. Okay. How does this possibly happen? Well, I can tell you how this happens, and I'll show you with my new indicator, by the way. Right, we can turn this thing on. The cycle has not yet bottomed. If we put the window on here, okay, we're not even close to the window bottoming for Coinbase. So the cycles once again are down, and guess what? No matter how bullish sounding the news is, even when it's as big as the SEC stepping back and saying, you know what? Okay, you're free. Go and do whatever you want. We're no longer coming after you, Coinbase. Even with that, the market still prints a new relative lower low. Why? Because the cycle window has not yet been entered, and because the cycle is still down, it is yet to bottom. As I was showing with the level 3 members over the weekend, this is likely going to do something akin to this, enter the window, reverse. When it does, the low will be picked with a daily cycle low. It will move this unconfirmed weekly cycle low under here because it's now a new lower low. And then it will be time for Camel to do what Camel does, which is buy the cycle low, get long and ride this thing to Valhalla. Okay, once again, I submit to you that cycles are in control, everything else is narrative. So I know a lot of you are probably convinced by now. If you weren't before, you probably are now. If you're brand new here and you didn't see this video from a couple of days ago called It's Finally Time, you can go and check that out and you'll see exactly what I was saying. I was explaining the cycles and all that kind of thing. I know a lot of people are convinced and converted at this point. Nothing really changes. The cycles remain in control. We're going to continue to let them bottom for us. And once they've bottomed and reversed and confirmed we got a new cycle behind us, we will have a great time getting hold of some longs. So absolutely crazy, right? And speaking of crazy, I found this and I thought this was brilliant. Let's be honest, this space has descended into something that I never really thought it would. Many, many years ago when I first got into this space, it was kind of like the Wild West. It was super unregulated, it was super sketchy. And I honestly thought over time it would become more regulated and less sketchy, but I'm not convinced it has. I actually think it might have gone the opposite direction. Trump and his wife just launched official meme coins. Okay, we had the Argentinian rug pull ruining everyone in its path. Some guy bought Kanye West's account just to pump a meme coin for max extraction from unaware retail. We also had a guy lose everything in meme coins and then live stream his unaliving of himself, stating that if he actually was successful, he would like to be turned into a meme. And these sick people actually did it minutes afterwards. Okay, and this is all just in the last 4 weeks. This place has become an absolute cesspool of degeneracy. We've had pump fun, scamming left, right, and center. People producing all kind of adult content. Okay, we've had kids threatening to harm animals if people didn't bid their thing up. I mean, this is truly abhorrent. And the worst part of all is the people that should be gatekeeping this, the people that should be stepping in and regulating, are just allowing it. Not only allowing it, they're enabling it and endorsing it at the same time, okay? At presidential levels, no less. Meanwhile, CZ from Binance is pushing memes of his pets, okay, just to get more volume on Binance. Coinbase and other tier 1 exchanges are listing every garbage coin under the sun just to make a quick buck whilst retail investors get obliterated. This space was supposed to evolve and be the future of finance, but instead it's devolved into a fire in the madhouse. this truly is leaving a horrible stain on the entire industry. And I've said this before, I'm going to say it again now. I am somewhat ashamed to tell people what I do for a living. In fact, when people ask me, I say I'm a stock trader. I do not say I'm a crypto guy. I also just don't like the idea that people think I'm in some way, shape or form involved in this industry. It's actually embarrassing. And I know most people know the difference between Bitcoin and crypto. They are two completely separate things. But to your unsuspecting average Joe that asks what you do for a living, okay, I just say stock trader because genuinely I am embarrassed and ashamed to be associated with this kind of nonsense. And I think deep down inside, you probably are as well. Either that or you're not a serious investor and individual. I don't believe you can call yourself a serious trader, a serious investor, and also be proud to be part of this space. That's just my opinion, okay? Feel free to disagree. It's not meant as a judgmental statement, even though it probably sounds like that. But I do think this space is very nasty and degenerate. And I actually think it's almost worse than a lot of this like live stream stuff you see on the gaming channels and all that kind of thing. I guess I'm starting to sound like an old man. I just kind of believe society collapsed a long time ago and not many people have worked it out just yet. But maybe I'm just being a bit too nihilistic. It's Monday, let's bring it back. Okay, let's bring it back. Because there is some incredible stuff going on in crypto. That's true. But the most influential people in this space have the power to steer this change for the good. Not just of the industry, but also for humanity. Remember, there is actually a chance here to have increased prosperity and freedom as a result of these kind of monetary evolutions. But instead, the people that are running and owning these exchanges, okay, they're really not here, apparently, to advance humanity or increase prosperity, at least not by my estimate and opinion. They seem to be much more about allowing this fire in the madhouse to continue. And I have long been speculating it might be because they don't want people to be buying Bitcoin. They want people to be wasting their money and losing their money on everything else because that keeps them away from owning the most pristine money ever discovered by humanity. Not intended to be a Maxi Monday moment. But again, I actually agree with this guy right here. I think it is embarrassing to be associated with this space at the moment. Like I said earlier, I identify as a stock trader. I've done for a while because this is indeed a circus right now. So, as you're going to see in a minute, I think the circus is close to blowing up, and we're going to talk about that when I get to a couple more charts. Before we do, I want to quickly deviate away and say, under the hood, okay, on a much more positive note, Bitcoin difficulty adjustment just hit a new all-time high, okay? And of course, that happens as more and more miners enter the space. As the hash rate increases, we have to increase the difficulty to stop the block rewards coming out too fast. And so this is again a sign of increased hash rate, increased capital investment into the space, increased confidence in the network longevity, and most importantly, and particularly pertaining to difficulty, this is also indicative that our Bitcoin is more secure than it ever has been. And whether or not you believe it, whether or not retail agree, the whales continue to think I am right when I say these things. The whales continue to see things that most retail traders don't. And the whales continue to buy at record quantities as observed by these big purple bars at the hard right edge. So the whales are buying like never seen before. And that's because they probably know something big is coming. What could that something big be? Well, I suggest to you, it might be a weekly cycle low and double. As you know, there is that blue arrow. In fact, let's do a live update. There it is. If I turn on my weekly cycle low and double, okay, we'll zoom out so we can get the arcs and everything involved. Okay, there it is. And then we'll zoom back in so you can see just how close we are to this thing playing out. Okay, not bad for an arbitrary yellow squiggle if I do say so myself. Getting dangerously close to that weekly cycle low time frame. There's the arrow. Okay, so not far. Really, if we're honest, not far at all now. And then, of course, it becomes time to face the facts, okay? For the first time ever, I think we have to start being a bit more serious out of this cycle low. It's been all very well and good holding and hodling and continuing to add to the stack and continuing to trade on the way up. And okay, yeah, we can be open to earlier tops, but so far, no sign of any of that. But by the time we get to this weekly cycle low, and assuming we do get that double, okay, then in here, we're going to be extremely late in the 4-year cycle. By the time we get here, it's going to be somewhere around July, okay? Now, why is that so important? If I go here and show you the major 4-year cycle, okay? Remember, we got the first bull run 37 months, and then we got a 12 or 13 month, bear market decline. Then we got 35 months to a peak and 12-month decline. We got 35 months to a peak, 12 months decline. And by the time we get to June or July, we are going to be around month 32, perhaps even month 33. So even if we're going to be extremely right translated and nothing is ever different, by the time we get here, okay, there really is not much time left in the major 4-year cycle. We're going to be rapidly approaching that 35-ish month top. The 35 bars puts us into October, which is also, as you can see from here, right where the next weekly cycle low is due. So it begs the question, doesn't it? Is this going to be an extremely overextended and then this? Okay, is that on the table? Or are we going to get something much more like this, so the trendline break, get one final pop to an extremely left translated weekly cycle here, and then we get an early breakdown and go, okay, 12-month bear market decline on our way to the 4-year cycle low, which of course would look something akin to this, okay, all the way up till, let's say, November, month 36, and then a decline. But regardless of how much fun we've had up to this point, regardless of how easy it's been to say things like, yeah, well, long and strong, continue to push, no failed cycles in sight. Remember, once this is in, okay, we're going to be, by the time this is unfolded, extremely late in the 4-year cycle. I have to start taking some profit in here. And of course, we have to be even more serious and open to downside, because if that cycle is to fail, in fact, let's redraw this. Once this cycle lows in, okay, if we had to get a cycle failure from here, which would look something like this, up, and then roll over and break down, okay, in here, I have to say that was the top. The Q1 top callers were correct. And even though we could, if you're super bullish, play a low probability weekly cycle low bounce later in life, down in around October, on a balance of probabilities, that would be expected to left translate and fail as well. Okay, so this is serious. We have finally reached the point in the cycle where we have to start thinking about nailing down some gains and protecting some downside if the cycle is to fail. It's still not my base case that we fail. I still think we're going to do this, okay, and then we're going to lighten up somewhere up here. I've also got a sneaky suspicion, and I'm kind of saving this for the members, but I've got a sneaky suspicion we're going to overthrow this a little bit. But that's all I'll say on that for now. Fomo Finder is doing what it's expected to do, right? Which is, of course, as we approach this weekly cycle low, as we get closer, this thing is moving down this way. Of course, it can ping around depending on the funding rate. It's probably going to continue to bounce, but I like to check it roughly once a day at roughly the same time, and that gives me somewhat confidence that it is moving in the right direction. If we scroll down to the chart, again, we're still going to be looking for this weekly cycle low to occur on a bit of purple as it did in the prior instances. If I zoom in here, what would that look like? I'm hoping for something akin to this, okay, where we get a little bit of a repeat and a V reversal on some purple. So if I draw a trend line in here, roughly speaking, this is very rough. I'm hoping that what we get is a little bit of a flush just to sweep all the lows, turn around, and then boom, off we go on our way to a double, and this section in here will be purple, looking a bit like that. That's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm hoping to see. We'll continue to monitor it. We'll continue to take it one day at a time. For now, though, as we know, everything seems to be going according to plan, so happy days there. For the stock market, again, it's a big candle, but crashed to levels not seen since 3 or 4 days ago. Don't really think we can read anything too much into it, at least in this moment in time. Gold continues to blast off higher, so happy days, but we are getting stretched. So we should get a pullback in the not too distant future. Silver continues to pay us, as do the miners in the members section. And the dollar is extremely close to finding a bottom here, okay? I've seen a lot of people call for this to move all the way down and sweep this low. But this is a weekly cycle low that's about to form. And it looks to me, I'm just deciding which way I want to draw this. I think we're going to draw it this way. Yeah, it looks to me like we're about to find a weekly cycle low and break out. And then at least for a couple of weeks, or at least one daily cycle, we should get some upside and relief here. And again, when we zoom out, it won't look too far away from my yellow squiggle, will it? So nobody wants to see this more than me. Okay, as I often say, nobody wants this more than me. That will certainly help get us up above $250,000 for Bitcoin. That will certainly help us get a massive third and final blow off top angle in the stock market. I would be more than comfortable and confident in grabbing this and expecting something akin to this from the daily cycle low that's upcoming early March for the stocks. In fact, it might even be even more insane. If we look at the DAX, I wouldn't be surprised if this is what's coming, right? I mean, see this at the hard right edge, parabolic. I wouldn't be surprised if the dollar can break down. But as it stands, we are, apparently, as far as I can tell, about to find a weekly cycle low, and then you're malpractice to be bearish until at least that thing fails. Also, seems to be a highly contrarian trade at this moment in time, at least based on my echo chamber. Take a quick look at the yields. So far, so good, okay? Reload and tell that to the bond market. Yes, it occurred from a bit higher up than expected, but so long as it can continue to roll over, then happy days there. So I'm your boy Camel. Welcome to the week. Welcome to Monday. I hope you're doing well in life. I hope you'll tune in every day. I hope you turn the notification bell on so you can see me get underneath these trades in real time. And other than that, have a fantastic week. Until next time, cheers. Bye.
Camel Finance, he's the man to see. Rocking the markets with his contrarian spree. Trades like a pro, no fear, no shame. Sticking to his guns in his money game. He's a badass, oh yes indeed. Camel Finance got the markets key. Taking us normies on a bump.